to Discograffiti, the deep dive podcast for music obsessives that gives maniacs like you and me the chance to connect with a brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe, and when I was a kid, I thought I loved music. But no, that was only the beginning. I almost lost my life, and in the process, it made music a top priority in a way I'd thought was completely unimaginable. I quit my job, went all in on Discograffiti, and never looked back. And so, with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about, or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on love! Along with our special guest, Joe Kennedy. This episode is part of a series called 7 and 7 and 7 is, the definitive 21-episode story of Arthur Lee and Love, which I've consciously crafted to act as the ultimate repository of fact and opinion on one of the greatest bands to ever walk the face of the earth, the almighty Love. It includes 13 episodes heralding the return of Discograffiti host OG Joe Kennedy, 6 episodes from a 4.5-hour interview with OG Love mainstay Johnny Echols, and 2 episodes from a 2.5-hour interview with the members of Baby Lemonade, who've served as Love now for coming up on 35 years. This is part 13, covering the first 2 releases by a brand new Love, For Sale and Out Here, which features a wild powerhouse performance style that couldn't possibly be more different from what had preceded it. Here are just a few of the many things that Joe discusses with Discograffiti in this podcast. How Arthur found the musicians that would populate the second iteration of Love, the massive stylistic differences with which the new Love boldly led, the wild drug habits of the new crop of guys, insane stories about Arthur's dog from that time, which, by the way, was named Self, the very unique recording situation that begat both records, the track selection process that was agreed upon by Elektra's Jack Holtzman and Blue Thumb's Bob Krasnow, the details behind the abjectly disastrous one-off reunion of the original Love for one final live performance, and an in-depth track-by-track deep dive on every song off For Sale and Out Here. Coming up, we've got incredible deep dive series on Jefferson Airplane with special guests Jack Cassidy, Jorma Kaukonen, China Kantner, and David Freiberg, Quicksilver Messenger Service with Lenny Kaye and David Freiberg again, and a hell of a lot more. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! So now we're at Phase 2. Now I Got Another Group Didn't Take Too Long, 1968 to 1970. Or, Once I Had a Singing Group Done Gone, Now I Got Another Group Didn't Take Too Long, from Doggone 1969. So, a terrible thing happened to Arthur after Forever Changes was released. He didn't die. Of course, it should have been a relief. Instead, it seems as if it may have felt to him, at least from the outside looking in, like some kind of anticlimax. A while ago, I came across a description of the quandary that Arthur Lee found himself in after releasing Forever Changes. Although I can't recall the source, it has since come to stand as my lasting image of Arthur Lee. I literally, even though it's a made-up concoction in my mind, it is how I picture Arthur Lee at all times when I hear his name. In 1967, Lee walked out the door, stepped onto the lawn, and turned to wave goodbye. Many years after shutting the door, we took a peek outside, and there he was, still on the lawn, still waving goodbye. Forever Changes came to represent the dangers inherent in an artist creating a definitive statement, in not just setting out to write the great American novel, but in getting it right and having the completed work exceed expectations. Lee was convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he was going to die after he completed the record, so he made sure he said everything he needed to say, and he communicated it all with a striking urgency. In lieu of dying, Lee did the next best thing. He killed the band erecting in its place a new version of love.
So conclusive was Forever Changes in the Arthur Lee canon that most see it as the last stop on the love train. That is far from the case. How his discography is viewed reminds me a hell of a lot of another significant black artist, Sly Stone, who many think stopped recording after Fresh or Small Talk at the latest. Although Forever Changes is indisputably their best record, and their days as a great band may certainly have been numbered, the flashes of inspiration to come were enough to see Love through to the end of the decade. To my ears, For Sale is the last time it all came together full throttle for Arthur. This overlooked gem stands as the final release before the magic of the early days at least began to dissipate.
By the late summer of '68, Arthur had put together Love Mach 2. He premiered the new lineup at the Whiskey from August 29th to September 2nd. He'd found his new group at a club called the Brass Ring on Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. It was a popular spot for both musicians and criminals. Perfect. Arthur says, after my original band and I split up, it was time to look for some new Love members. I went to see Noonie Ricketts' band at the Brass Ring. His bass player, Frank Fayed, was a guy I knew back in the California club days. These guys could really play and were very versatile. In my opinion, they were just what the doctor ordered. I saw right away that if I could get these guys, my mind would definitely be opened up to new and different styles of writing. In other words, to keep up with them and their group, I would have to change what I was doing to a heavier, jazzier rock funk type of thing. That was what I did before the first Love group. If I could get them, it was going to be a lot of fun. I told Frank about my situation, and after showing him what I had been doing with my life musically, he thought there might be a chance to try out this Love thing. I had a bass player. Now I needed to see if Noonie's drummer would go for the idea. His name was George Saranovich, and man could he play. He was one of the best jazz rock drummers I had ever seen. The only thing was he was doing well with Noonie, and he was recording a song with a guy named Joe South. It was called The Games People Play. It hadn't come out yet, and he didn't know whether to go on the road with that guy, stay with Noonie, or to join up with me. I wanted George for my drummer, and I made up my mind I was going to get him. I invited him up to my place in Studio City and told him about my idea for the band and how I didn't think that song he was working on expressed the drummer enough. I said he would stand out in my band. At the time, I had 2 houses on the lot in Studio City, and I told George he could rent one and rehearse there. George went for the idea, and besides his drumming, we became really good friends. George was from Pittsburgh and had played with a group called the Skyliners, who'd recorded a song, Since I Don't Have You, which was one of my favorites of all time. All I needed was a lead guitar player, and I was on my way. I got a guy named Jay Donelan, who, like George, could play just about any style of music that I was familiar with. We also became real close and hung out together a lot. We were one big happy family, playing and sharing. Jay and I even wrote a song together, singing Cowboy. I had gigs to do. I was lucky to get these guys, but I had to whip the group into shape as quickly as possible. As fast as they would learn an old love song for the set, I would be writing a new one for the band. I was really having a ball. I liked these guys. They always thought they could outplay whoever we were playing on the bill with. It was really a competition thing, and they really cared about how they sounded. Whoever it was, George always thought he could play better. Cream's drummer, Ginger Baker, had these double bass drums. George just had to get some and played better than Ginger.
The Noonie Rickett 4 that Arthur saw before poaching them like a lunatic, poor Noonie, featured a guitarist named Gary Rowles. However, Gary turned down Arthur's invitation to hop on board the Love train since he had already committed to play guitar at ex-Buffalo Springfield drummer Dewey Martin's recently formed band, New Buffalo. Gary Rowles says, Arthur had a reputation back then for being hard to work with. Instead, I did the New Buffalo thing, but that was a mess. As soon as I found out that Dewey was trying to pass the band off as Buffalo Springfield, I was out of there. By that point, Arthur had already picked Frank and George from Noonie's band to be the new Love. James J. Donelan, alias Jay Lewis, was playing in a band with Snoopy and Jay Cantrelli at a Beverly Hills joint called The Factory. Snoopy arranged the audition for Jay at Arthur's house. A native Angelino who had been playing guitar since the age of 10, Jay had done the club circuit with the Coachmen and formed the band Moore Park Intersection, who had recorded a February 1968 single for Capitol Records. Having caught Love in their heyday on the Strip, Jay was familiar with the band and their style. When Jay arrived, he fully expected to be taking passes at the Forever Changes songbook, but discovered to his surprise that Arthur had taken a 180-degree hard rock pivot.
Jay says, I walked in with a Martin acoustic and started tuning it up. Then I looked at George's double bass drum setup and Frank's amps. Arthur said, we're not doing that shit anymore. We're doing something else. so they dove into one of Arthur's new songs, August, because he, Frank, and George already had a couple of weeks of rehearsals as a trio and had that song formulated. I went back to my car and got my electric guitar and amp set up and started working on that song. In about an hour, we had it worked out and I got the gig.
With these new guys, Arthur now had total control over Love. No more personality conflicts, ego clashes, jealousies, or insubordination. He could hire and fire at will. He could and would exert total control over the contracts, advances, songwriting, production, and gigs. Basically, Love was now a band in name only, but really it was more like a vehicle for Arthur Lee, who would henceforth act as booking agent, producer, and even manager, having shit-canned Mike Gruber on September 17, 1968. It was impossible to get it twisted now. Arthur Lee was Love, and Love was Arthur Lee.
August kicks things off with abject ferocity, and it's really a kitchen sink template for the bountiful gifts that late-era Love had to offer. There's a mysterious but really fiery Spanish-style guitar intro that leads into an almost laughably bombastic power trio assault. Delicate folk-style verses like we were talking about before that kind of revert back to the Forever Changes transition-style thing that's happening, and a crazy jam-out middle section that features drumming so busily fill-intensive, Neil Peart himself thinks it should be taken down a notch.
Yeah.
August is one of Love's best songs, as far as I'm concerned, and it's proof positive that they hadn't said it all with Forever Changes. If anything, they now had an entirely new vocabulary through which to articulate their life and times, and the overdriven Marshall stacks were definitely more era-appropriate by this point than flutes, horns, and strings. All right, that concludes your free sneak peek into today's bonus episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4 or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 3 weekly episodes. That's Friday's main episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's our podcast within a podcast featuring Patreon members as guests, and your Tuesday bonus episode. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 7-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/discograffiti.